Welcome back to Chess Tactic today. In round 1 of Checkmate, USA vs India 2025, we open with a powerhouse matchup. Fabiano Caruana representing Team USA against Arjun Erigaisi for Team India. The game begins with an unexpected pawn setup, the London reversed into chaos, as both sides fight for control in the center. Caruana builds up steady pressure while Erigaisi strikes back with sharp counterplay on both wings. It's a battle of precision, calculation, and nerves. Let's see how this clash of titans unfolds. And we're off. Caruana opens with pawn to c3, the Saragossa opening. It's a quiet, flexible move, preparing to support a d4 pawn push without committing the knight just yet. A very solid, modern way to start the game. Erigaisi immediately strikes in the center with pawn to f5. This is the most principled response, grabbing space and challenging White's plans right from the get-go. Black is saying, I'm not going to let you dictate the pace. There's the follow-up pawn to d4. Caruana creates the central tension he was aiming for. The game is already at a crossroads. Will the center open up or will it remain a tense, closed battle? And Erigaisi resolves the tension immediately. Pawn takes pawn on d4. This clarifies the structure and prevents White from building a massive pawn center. Caruana recaptures with his c-pawn, keeping a firm grip on the center. This structure often leads to a long, strategic fight reminiscent of a Caro-Kann or a Slav defense. Black solidifies his own central control with pawn to d5. We now have a very symmetrical pawn structure. These kinds of positions are all about small advantages and subtle plans. Knight to c3, a standard developing move, putting pressure on Black's d5 pawn and getting a key piece into the game. Everything is calm and logical so far. In response, pawn to c6, a fantastic move from Erigaisi. It supports the d5 pawn, prepares to develop the queen, and keeps the position rock solid. White develops the light-squared bishop to f4. This is a great square for the bishop, where it puts pressure on Black's position and eyes the weak c7 square. White is developing with purpose. And Black immediately challenges that bishop to d6. Erigaisi is asking the question, do you want to trade? This is a common idea, trading off White's active bishop to ease the pressure. Caruana declines the trade, moving the bishop back to j3. He wants to keep his influential piece on the board. This also prepares to open the h-file for his rook if the knights are ever exchanged. Knight to s7, a flexible developing move for Black. The knight can support the center, and it prepares to jump to f5 to challenge White's position. Pawn to e3, White builds a solid pawn triangle in the center and frees the dark-squared bishop. Caruana is just playing textbook, solid chess here. And just as we predicted, the knight hops into f5. It attacks the bishop on g3 and puts pressure on White's kingside, a very active and annoying piece. Bishop to d3, a multi-purpose move. It develops the bishop, controls key squares, and puts the question back to Black's knight on f5. Knight takes bishop on g3. Erigaisi decides to make the trade, removing White's strong bishop, but there's a small price to pay for this. Pawn takes knight on g3, and here's the price. White now has the open h-file for his rook. This is a long-term asset that could become very dangerous later on. Keep an eye on that file, folks. Black plays pawn to g6, a necessary move to control the f5 square and prevent any white pieces from landing there. It does, however, create some light square weaknesses around the king. Knight to f3, a natural developing move, getting another piece into the action and preparing to castle. Knight to d7, Erigaisi continues his development. The knight is headed towards the center, potentially to f6 or b6. Queen to d12, Caruana connects his rooks and prepares to decide where his king will go. This move also hints at a potential queenside castling. Queen to s7, a mirror move from Black. It does the same job, connecting the rooks and preparing to castle on either side. And there it is, Caruana castles queenside. This is where the game gets exciting, folks. With opposite side castling, it's often a race to see who can checkmate the other king first. The story of this game has just been defined. Knight to f6, a solid response from Erigaisi, bringing the knight to a great defensive square and preparing to complete his own development. King to bone, a classic prophylactic move when you castle queenside. The king steps away from the open c-file, making it just a little bit safer from future attacks. Bishop to g4, a very annoying pin on the knight on f3. This move restricts White's pieces and adds pressure to the center. Queen to c2, Caruana sidesteps the pin and prepares to challenge Black's control of the center. The queen also eyes the long diagonal. And Erigaisi castles queenside as well, so not an opposite-side castling race after all. Both kings are now on the same side of the board, which means we're in for a complex strategic battle. Rook from Hone to Eon, a subtle but strong move. Caruana prepares to fight for the open e-file and brings another piece into the central struggle. King to bait, just like Caruana, Erigaisi tucks his king into a safer square. It's these small, careful moves that separate the top players from the rest. Knight to d12, a smart repositioning. The knight was pinned on f3, so Caruana moves it to d12 where it can be rerouted to a more active square, maybe c4 or b3. Bishop to e6, Erigaisi retreats his bishop, breaking the pin and strengthening his center. The game is like a coiled spring right now, with both sides improving their positions. Knight to b3, Caruana's knight finds a new home, putting pressure on black's queenside and controlling important squares. Pawn to h5, an interesting move by Erigaisi. He's grabbing space on the kingside and preventing white from expanding with g4. This creates a potential target but also restricts white's plans. Pawn to a3, a useful move to control the b4 square and prepare to create space on the queenside. A quiet move, but one with a long-term plan. Rook to sate, black brings another rook to the c-file, the only open file on the board. Controlling open files is a key principle you can use in your own games. Knight to a4, a provocative move from Caruana. The knight looks a bit strange on the edge of the board, but it puts pressure on the b6 pawn and creates tactical possibilities. In response, pawn to b6. Erigaisi kicks the knight and shores up his queenside. This is a very logical and solid reply. Knight to c3, Caruana's knight returns to a more central square. The maneuvering continues as both players search for an opening. Queen to b7, Erigaisi improves his queen's position, connecting the rooks and preparing to challenge white on the queenside. Queen to e2, the dance of the queens continues. Caruana repositions his queen, keeping his options open and preparing for a potential central break. Queen to d7, Erigaisi mirrors again. It's clear that both players are respecting each other immensely, making small adjustments and waiting for the right moment to strike. Rook to Cone, Caruana challenges black for control of the c-file. The tension is slowly but surely building. Bishop to g4, Erigaisi brings his bishop back to this annoying square, once again putting pressure on white's kingside. Queen to d12, Caruana again has to move his queen to break the pin. It feels like we're seeing some repetition, but these are subtle tactical battles. Bishop to f5, Erigaisi repositions the bishop, this time putting pressure on the d3 bishop and controlling the long diagonal. King to Aeon, another prophylactic move from Caruana, tucking the king even further away into safety. He knows the storm is coming. Bishop takes bishop on d3. Erigaisi decides to trade, removing white's strong bishop and simplifying the position a little. Queen takes bishop on d3, a simple recapture. The position remains very balanced. Knight to g4, a very active move from Erigaisi. The knight eyes the weak f2 square and creates immediate threats. The game is starting to heat up. Rook to c2, Caruana prepares to double his rooks on the c-file and also keeps an eye on the second rank for defensive purposes. Rook to e8, Erigaisi activates his last piece, bringing the rook to the e-file to fight for central control. Rook to Cone, Caruana completes his plan of doubling rooks. He now has immense pressure down the c-file. This is a classic strategic idea: identify an open file and dominate it. Queen to b7, black's queen moves again, keeping the position flexible and preparing to deal with white's pressure on the c-file. Knight to done, a deep strategic maneuver from Caruana. The knight is heading to e3 or f2 to help defend the kingside and support a potential pawn break. Pawn to a5, a bold move from Erigaisi. He's creating counterplay on the queenside, trying to undermine white's pawn structure. Knight to d12, another knight retreat. Caruana is patiently untangling his pieces, getting ready for the final phase of the game. King to a7, a very strange-looking move, but it has a point. Erigaisi is preparing to bring his rook to the b-file to create more pressure. Knight to phone, Caruana continues his knight tour. This knight is like a firefighter, moving from one side of the board to the other to put out fires and prepare for attack. And here comes the counterpunch, pawn to f5. Erigaisi strikes in the center, challenging white's control and trying to open lines for his pieces. The battle is truly joined now. Knight to d12, the knight returns to its post, ready to react to black's central break. Rook to c7, a clever defensive move, preparing to contest the c-file and keep white's rooks at bay. Pawn to f4, Caruana responds in kind. He's not afraid of the complications, clamping down on the f5 square and fixing black's pawns. Knight to f6. The knight retreats, but it's still a powerful piece, controlling key squares and keeping an eye on white's king. Knight to f2. Caruana's knight finally reaches its destination, bolstering his kingside defense. Rook to e6, a fantastic multi-purpose move. The rook prepares to swing over to the kingside for an attack or support the center. Queen to b3. Caruana shifts his queen to a more active square, putting pressure on black's queenside and eyeing the weak pawns. Knight to f4, a brilliant move from Erigaisi. He plants his knight in the center of the board, creating all sorts of tactical problems for white. Knight takes knight on f4. Caruana decides to trade, eliminating the dangerous knight but opening up the f-file for black. Pawn takes knight on f4. Black now has a passed e-pawn and an open f-file for his rook. The position has become incredibly sharp. And here we go, pawn to g4. Caruana sees that the time for quiet moves is over. He launches a direct attack on the kingside, trying to rip open the position in front of black's king. This is the moment the game truly ignites. Black answers with pawn to b5. It's a race. While white attacks on the kingside, black is creating chaos on the queenside. Who will be faster? Pawn takes pawn on h5. The first breach is made. Caruana has opened the g-file and his rook is ready to join the attack. Black recaptures. The kingside is now wide open. It's a double-edged sword. Both sides have attacking chances. Pawn to g4 again, a relentless assault from Caruana. He's not giving Erigaisi a moment to breathe, continuing to tear open the kingside. And black responds with pawn to a4, kicking the queen. This is total chaos. Both players are throwing everything they have at each other. It's an absolute thriller. Queen to a8. The queen is forced to retreat, but it's still in the game, keeping an eye on both sides of the board. Pawn takes pawn. Black eliminates the dangerous g-pawn, but this opens up more lines for white's pieces. Knight takes pawn on g4. The white knight leaps into the attack, and it is a terrifying piece, sitting right on the doorstep of the black king. Queen to b6, a desperate attempt to create counter-threats. The queen attacks the beat-woe pawn and puts pressure on white's position. Rook to c3, a calm, defensive move in the middle of a storm. Caruana protects his weak pawns and prepares to consolidate. King to b7, the black king tries to find safety, but there are no safe squares left on the board. Knight to f5, what a move! Caruana plants his knight on a dominant central square where it controls everything. This knight is the hero of white's position. Bishop takes knight. Erigaisi has no choice but to capture the monster knight, but this comes at a steep price. Pawn takes bishop, and here's the price. White now has a protected passed pawn on f5. This pawn is a dagger pointed at the heart of black's position. Rook to f7, black tries to create a blockade, but white's attack is just too strong. Rook to c5, a fantastic move, cutting off the black king and preparing to swing over for the final attack. Rook to h7, Erigaisi brings his rook over for defense, but it might be too little too late. Queen to bone, a brilliant repositioning. The queen gets out of the way of any threats and prepares to join the attack from a different angle. Rook to h3, a last-ditch effort to create counterplay, but white's threats are overwhelming. Queen to c2, the queen swings back into the attack, lining up with the rook and creating deadly threats. Rook to h6, black is desperately trying to hold on, bringing all his pieces back for defense. Queen to c3, the pressure mounts. The white queen is a monster, dominating the board. Rook to g6, black tries to challenge white on the g-file, but white has a trump card. And there it is, pawn to f5, the other pawn joins the attack. White's pawns are like an unstoppable wave crashing down on black's position. This is a game-winning move. Rook to g2, a desperate check, but it only delays the inevitable. Pawn to e6, this is the killer blow. This pawn is a monster and it's going to decide the game. It tears open black's defenses and creates unstoppable threats. A truly brilliant move from Caruana. Pawn to b4, a final desperate attempt at counterplay, but it's far too late. The kingside is collapsing. Pawn takes pawn, a simple recapture. White is not distracted by the queenside. Pawn to a3, black's pawn runs, but white's passed pawn is much faster. Queen takes pawn. Caruana cleans up on the queenside, while his passed pawn on the e-file is the real star of the show. Rook to h2, black creates a threat of backrank mate, but Caruana has it all calculated. Pawn to e7, the pawn is just one square away from glory. Black is completely lost. Rook takes b2, a desperate move trying to create chaos, but it's not enough. And there it is, the coronation. The pawn reaches the 8th rank and promotes to a queen. Caruana now has 2 queens on the board. This is the decisive moment, a beautiful culmination of his brilliant attacking play. Rook to outwo check, a spite check but nothing more. Queen takes rook, Caruana calmly deals with the threat. Rook takes queen check, another check but white's king is perfectly safe. King takes rook, and after the dust settles, white is simply a queen up. Queen to a 6 check, Erigaisi continues to fight but the result is not in doubt. King to beat woe, the king easily escapes the checks. Queen to outwo check. Rook to seat woe, a simple block, white's technique is flawless. Queen takes pawn, black grabs a pawn but it's a hollow victory. Queen takes c6 check, and now the final mating net begins. Caruana is closing in for the kill. King to bait, the king is forced into the corner. Queen to b6 check, a relentless attack. King to e8, the king has only one square left. Rook to sate, and that is checkmate, a stunning finish to an incredible game. Caruana's relentless pressure and brilliant pawn pushes proved to be too much. What a masterpiece of attacking chess. What a game! From a quiet, strategic opening to a blazing tactical inferno, this match had it all. A massive congratulations to Fabiano Caruana for a flawless victory. Thanks for watching, and be sure to join us next time on Chess Tactic Today.